The Prime Minister has no right to impose C-5 under closure when the bill gives him exceptional powers, unlike anything that we've seen before. Is that the Prime Minister's intention, to bypass Parliament and govern by decree like Donald Trump?
Wow, it looks like people are starting to finally wake up and see who Mark Carney really is. Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to see what Mark Carney's been up to within just 3 weeks of being in Parliament, and we only have one more left before the summer break. But regardless of what the media has been saying, all this elbows up conversation, things are not looking good, especially with the sweeping powers and these bills that Mark Carney and the Liberals have been trying to implement. And the latest one is now Bill C-5. Earlier on Monday, the Bloc brought this up in the House of Commons, where Steve McKinnon gave this crappy answer.
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, C-5 is an answer to an economic crisis, a crisis that has been provoked by our southern neighbours. It's a trade crisis, and here is the answer. We have the answer. We got a mandate from Canadians to fight this tariff war, to create opportunity in Canada, and to do everything that we can to help our economy and to protect jobs in Quebec, including forestry, aluminum, steel, and other jobs in Quebec. That's our answer to the economic crisis.
Now, of course, leave it to the Liberals to say that the reason they need all this superpower is because of the crisis from down south. But if you're unfamiliar with what Bill C-5 is, it's actually two provisions kind of smashed together. And the first provision is actually not bad. It's for the free trade, basically the interprovincial trade that we've been trying to remove between all of our provinces. But the second one is the Building Canada Act, which this one just gives them sweeping power, not just to Carney, but also to other ministers. And when you look at it, it says, a minister of the federal government would be designated by the order of the governor and council to implement an act, the minister. The act also provides for the creation of a new federal office under the responsibility of the minister to coordinate the performance of duties under the act and to serve as the point of contact for project proponents. Now, this essentially allows them to bypass a lot of these provisions that they already have in order to get projects done, as long as they're deemed national interest projects. And you can see that here in the authorization process. Once a project is designated as a national interest project, the proposed legislation would allow the federal government to issue authorization required under the following statutes and regulations through a single document, an authorization document, meaning they don't have to go through all the regular rigmarole. They could just all meet in an office, say that this is a national project, we need to steamroll this, we need to get this through, and just bypass all the other provisions. And it says these projects, however, no longer need to complete the initial planning phase under the IAA, which is the the Impact Assessment Act, due to a specific non-application provision in the Act. The Act would also empower the federal government to make regulations in order to exempt national interest projects from any provisions of the relevant federal laws and regulations, or to vary the application of any such provision. So again, these guys just want to have this omnipotent power, and you're seeing that with Bill C-2, Bill C-3, now we're having this with Bill C-5, and there's even Liberals that are coming out saying, what the heck is going on with all these bills and all this sweeping power that the Liberals are trying to take? Now, on top of the Bloc and some other Liberals who are starting to realize, like, what the hell is really going on here, the NDP came out with a press conference yesterday, and this is what they had to say.
The NDP welcomes legislation to help ensure that Canada has greater sovereignty with our economy, especially with the threats, the constant changing threats of tariffs by Trump. We absolutely agree with that. Bill C-5 is not the way to get it done. It provides ministers and cabinet with massive, unprecedented government overreach to make decisions on what they feel is nation-building project, usurping constitutional obligations, usurping rights contained in Section 35, of the Constitution, bulldozing and getting rid of environmental assessment processes, getting rid of the involvement of civil society groups, of funding and resources of civil society groups to provide projects with environmental oversight.
Indigenous opposition to this bill was entirely foreseeable given the way that it was structured. Do you feel like the Liberal government is attempting to create this false dichotomy where opposition to this bill is perceived as opposition to development, because opposition to the second half they could frame as implicit opposition to the first half, the removing of the trade barriers?
Well, I mean, absolutely. But I mean, the opposition, in my opinion, hasn't even begun to grow yet. I know that the AFN is meeting on Monday in regards to, where nations across Canada stand in response to Bill C-5. But let's be clear, this is not the first time that the Liberal government has trampled on their constitutional obligations to Indigenous people. Look at what happened with the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ruling that ordered the Liberal government to stop racially discriminating against Indigenous children. This is a pattern of constitutional violations against Indigenous peoples that the Liberals seem to, on one hand, talk about reconciliation, and on the other hand, trample on human rights and constitutional obligations to Indigenous peoples.
Now, I usually don't agree much with the MP Gazan, but it's true. This is something we started to notice with the Liberals. They say one thing and then they do the complete opposite, and then they'll tell you, oh, this is for you, this is for your safety, this is for your benefit. And yesterday in the House of Commons, we saw this again because they are starting to talk about censorship again. Conservative MP Rachel Thomas was bringing up the censorship bills like C-11, C-18, C-63, which was the Online Harms Act that actually got scrapped once Parliament got prorogued. But they're looking to bring it back. And this was a little bit of the interaction with some of the Conservatives, and none other than Mr. Stephen Guilbeault.
So what I'm hearing is that this is the same old government, absolutely hell-bent on continuing to censor what Canadians can see and say online. My question is with regards to Bill C-63 and going forward. You see, C-63 doesn't just target predators, it targets opinions, it targets freedom of thought, it targets discourse within the online sphere. It institutes thought police, for crying out loud. It's a Trojan horse for further government control. So I ask again, in any future legislation going forward, will this Liberal government commit to respecting Canadians and making sure that they do not censor them?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, just about everything that the member said in her intervention is wrong. Bill C-11 ensures that Canadian artists get rewarded, as they should, by online platform, Mr. Speaker. Bill C-11 makes sure that Canadian content can be discovered by Canadians, by my kids, by all of our kids, instead of just international artists, Mr. Speaker. That's exactly what what Bill C-11 does. It gives the opportunity for Canadians to discover Canadian artists, something we should all support, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Elgin, St. Thomas, London South. Mr. Speaker, baseless smears like that are why these Liberals can't be trusted to regulate speech in this country. For years, this Liberal government has determined to censor what Canadians see and say online. From Bill C-11, which put the Liberals in control of YouTube algorithms, to Bill C-18, which squeezed out small and independent media, and to their thought crime Bill C-63. Now we learn in the National Post that cabinet ministers over there are all clamoring over who gets to be responsible for the latest online censorship law. So will the minister who gets to censor what Canadians say please reveal themselves now? L'honorable ministre de l'identité.
The Honourable Minister.
Even Google agreed that they should do this. Google will pay $100 million to help Canadian journalism in this country. An multinational US-based company would agree to do that, but the Conservative Party of Canada would vote against this, would prevent that from happening, would want to prevent our media from getting $100 million so that there's more local content, more journalists hired in our newsroom across the country. It is simply unthinkable. It is immoral, Mr. Speaker.
Now, what's immoral is the fact that this guy still has a job and he's pretty high up there now on the totem pole with his new ranking. But he's going on about more media money. That's the last thing these guys need. They have plenty of money already. But then he's talking about Google agreeing. If you look this up, it says, yes, Google was compelled by the CRTC to pay $100 million to Canadian Journalism Collective. So to me, compelled doesn't really sound like they agreed. It kind of sounds like they were forced to because of the legislation that was implemented. And I like that Rachel Thomas and Andrew Lawton kept going at them, kept pushing at it. And Andrew Lawton had actually been doing a lot of that lately. He last week was addressing another Liberal with the carbon tax. And this was that interaction.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The member opposite had just mentioned that he was very supportive of a great many of Justin Trudeau's policies. I'm wondering if one of those was the consumer carbon tax, knowing that it was in full force when he was nominated as a Liberal candidate in October of last year.
The honourable member for Winnipeg West in 30 seconds.
The carbon tax at its time was something I supported. And it did what it was supposed to have done. It was a victim of misinformation, and we know that that's exactly what I said, and stand by it. And we knew that this policy could not recover with the misinformation that this had been put under.
And we were lucky enough to see a follow-up to that whole interaction, because this Liberal member had this little speech that he did, which then Andrew decided to ask him a question after he finished his speech. Take a look.
Finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to address a measure that has sparked significant discussion across the country, namely the removal of the consumer carbon price. As part of this legislation, our government is proposing to permanently repeal the fuel charge framework outlined in Part 1 of the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act. This repeal will be carefully and responsibly implemented in 4 phases, beginning with a retroactive repeal of charging provisions effective April 1st, 2025, and concluding with a full wind down by April 1st, 2035. Why are we taking this significant step? Because responsible government must be attentive and responsive to the lived realities of its citizens. We have listened closely to the voices of Canadians from coast to coast to coast, from hardworking farmers in rural heartlands to families in remote communities and small business owners who face mounting expenses. We understand that the rising cost of fuel, driven in part by the consumer carbon price, has disproportionately impacted these groups, creating this additional financial strain that makes day-to-day life more challenging.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for finally acknowledging what Conservatives have been talking about for years, which was how harmful the consumer carbon tax is on a great many Canadians. I appreciated very much his willingness to explain exactly how this increase to the price of fuel has been hurting people, but I'm a little confused, Madam Speaker, because I brought this up to that very same member last week, and he said that he defended and supported the consumer carbon tax and that it was a, quote, victim of misinformation. So when Conservatives said what this member just said, it was misinformation, but when he says it, it's supposed to be a reflection of this government's commitment to affordability. So which is it? Was the consumer carbon tax making things less affordable for Canadians, or is that all just a conspiracy theory?
Member for Winnipeg West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Interesting to hear from a member of the party across talking about conspiracy theories, but I will say that it was a product of its time, and at the time, it was doing what it was supposed to do. We have a changing economy, and we heard Canadians how they want to change in this. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
And here we have another prime example of them saying one thing yet doing another. When Conservatives talk about the carbon tax, it's misinformation, but for them, they're just trying to help us Canadians. And when we were saying 8 out of 10 people are actually worse off, they said, no, you're better off. But now apparently the carbon tax was hurting people's pockets, and now they're making it more affordable for you. So they just are all over the place. And even my new MP, Rhonda Kirkland here in Oshawa, she addressed this same Liberal MP, asking him about the consumer carbon tax and how much emissions it actually dropped. And listen to his answer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The member across said that he felt the carbon tax did what it needed to do for the time that we had it. Can he tell me exactly how much the emissions were lowered as a result of the carbon tax?
The honourable member for Winnipeg West.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Speaker. In response to some of the heckling, it was not zero. I will admit I do not know the number.
And that's the hypocrisy of this all. They want to be the arbiters of truth, yet we're the ones spreading misinformation that they can't even actually provide the real stats for something they're trying to defend. It just makes no sense. But I wanted to end off on this last clip of the unhinged, no longer MP Charlie Angus, who decided to come to the Ottawa press conference the other day and talk about Donald Trump, the riots in LA, and the G7. And just listen to what he said, because this sounds a lot like something that he supported not too long ago.
I am here in the press gallery of the Parliament of Canada, the heart of our democratic engagement with people. And this morning I offer my deep concern, solidarity, and prayers with the people of California who are out in the streets unarmed, defending the rule of law against illegal kidnapping and deportation, and they're being faced down by the military might of the United States Marines. We're not talking about creeping fascism here. This is full-on police state tyranny from the gangster president Donald Trump. And this is the man who will soon be crossing our border to attend the G7 meetings in Canada. I have received hundreds of messages of concern and outrage from Canadians that a convicted felon and a man who has threatened our nation's sovereignty is being allowed into our country. I understand the Prime Minister Carney's reluctance to escalate the situation with the MAGA president. But we have to stop kidding ourselves, and we have to be very honest about what we are being asked to engage with. Donald Trump poses a clear threat to American democracy, to Canadian sovereignty, and to the international rule of law.
So this guy stands strong with the rioters in LA, saying that Trump is an authoritarian fascist, that the military shouldn't be getting involved with these protests. Yet he supported this exact same thing when Trudeau implemented the RCMP on our peaceful truckers during the trucker convoy. That's hypocrisy right there, folks. But as always, love to hear from you guys. Let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. If you can, please hit the subscribe button, because who knows with the Online Harms Act if I'll be around much longer. And as always, enjoy your weekend, and I will catch you guys later. Thanks so much.